Some voices were erased because they contradicted the hero's narrative. Others were silenced because they lived outside acceptable social structures. Circe was both. I am the archivist, and this is Ghost Lectures, Voices from Classic Literature. Tonight's speaker has been dead for 3,000 years. Not literally, she may never have existed at all, but her voice has been dead, buried under the weight of someone else's narrative. The surviving record describes the following. In Book 10 of Homer's Odyssey, composed sometime in the 8th century BCE, the hero Odysseus recounts an encounter with a woman he describes as a dangerous sorceress. Her name is Circe. She is divine, daughter of Helios the sun god, niece of Pasiphae, and she dwells alone on the island of Aia, practicing her knowledge of herbs, transformations, and what the Greeks called pharmakia, drugs, poisons, medicines, and magic. Odysseus tells us that Circe is beautiful and treacherous, that she lures men into her home and transforms them into animals, that she represents a threat to masculine authority and heroic progress. The story goes like this. Odysseus and his men, exhausted from their journey and desperate for provisions, arrive at her island. They do not know whose shore they have reached. They do not ask permission to land. They send scouts ahead who discover Circe's house. She welcomes them inside, offers some food and wine laced with drugs, and transforms them into swine. Odysseus, protected by the god Hermes and armed with a magical herb, confronts her with his sword drawn. He forces her to release his men. She submits. She becomes his lover. She offers him guidance for the journey ahead. It's a famous story, a triumph of masculine cunning over feminine sorcery, Greek intelligence defeating dangerous, unnatural power. But there is something we must acknowledge about this story. We have only ever heard one version of it. Circe does not narrate the Odyssey. She does not write her own account. In Homer's text, she speaks fewer than 20 lines, most of them promises of hospitality, offers of guidance, or warnings about dangers ahead. She isn't granted interiority or given a philosophy. She exists in the poem primarily as an obstacle, a test of Odysseus's cleverness, a dangerous woman whose power must be neutralized before she can become useful to the hero's journey. She is, in every sense, spoken about rather than allowed to speak. This isn't unusual in ancient literature. The Odyssey is Odysseus's story. It's told at his banquet, to his hosts, in his voice. He controls the narrative, and he decides what is remembered. He determines who is hero and who is monster, who is victim and who is villain. And what Odysseus remembers is a sorceress, a woman whose power is unnatural, whose solitude is suspicious, whose autonomy represents a threat to the proper order of things. But let us consider what the text actually shows us. Circe lives alone. She's chosen this. She's skilled at weaving, that most acceptable feminine art, and she sings while she works. She tends her home. She possesses knowledge of herbs and transformations that even the gods respect. She doesn't seek out conflict or raid ships or attack travelers. She is, by all evidence, a woman living independently on her own island, answering to no man's authority. Then men arrive. Armed men, strangers, men who have spent 10 years at war learning to kill, to take, to justify violence as heroism. Men who are now lost, far from home, and who have learned that survival means seizing what you need before someone else seizes it from you. They enter her home. They expect to be fed and welcomed, to take what they need from this woman's resources. And Circe, who has lived enough to know what men want, what men do, what men become when they believe themselves entitled to a woman's hospitality, makes a choice. She transforms them. When Odysseus later confronts her, when he forces her submission at sword point, when he shares her bed and accepts her guidance, this is called heroism. This is called cunning. This is called the proper exercise of masculine authority over feminine power. But when Circe transforms the men who invaded her home, this is called sorcery. malice, evidence of her dangerous, unnatural nature. Tell me, what's the difference? For nearly 3,000 years, Circe has been remembered as Homer wrote her, seductress, sorceress, obstacle to heroic progress. She's the dangerous woman whose power must be overcome, the temptress who delays the hero's journey. She's proof that women who live outside male authority, who possess knowledge, exercise agency, refuse to be conquered until they choose alliance, are threats to civilization itself. But contemporary analysis of ancient Greek literature reveals a pattern. In the classical world, women who possessed power occupied an impossible position. If they were beautiful, they were dangerous. If they were knowledgeable, they were unnatural. If they lived without husbands or fathers to mediate their authority, they were suspect. The Greeks had a word for the kind of knowledge Circe possessed: pharmakia. It meant drugs, poisons, medicines, magic, all the same word, because the line between healing and harming, between medicine and sorcery, depended entirely on who wielded the knowledge. When men possessed such knowledge, they were physicians, healers, wise counselors. When women possessed it, they were witches. Circe represents every woman in classical literature who refused to be defined by her relationship to men, who lived autonomously, who exercised power and made choices. And the narrative could not allow such a woman to exist without consequence. She had to be conquered, subdued, transformed from adversary into ally, from threat into helper. Her power had to be neutralized, her autonomy curtailed, her voice silenced. She had to become part of the hero's story rather than the subject of her own. But here is the tragedy. Circe was never allowed to articulate her own understanding. Every word spoken about her came from Odysseus's mouth, from the Greek perspective, from the hero who needed her to be dangerous so that his conquest of her could be glorious. She was given a few lines of dialogue, yes, fragments of speech, moments of guidance, but never a full defense. Never the opportunity to explain what she saw when those men arrived at her door. Never the chance to articulate her philosophy of transformation, her understanding of masculine hunger, reasons for the choices she made. She became a symbol in someone else's story, a plot device, a dangerous woman whose only purpose was to test the hero's cleverness and then serve his needs. She was never allowed to be the subject of her own testimony. The document you are about to hear is a reconstruction. No verified record exists of Circe speaking in her own defense, articulating her own philosophy, or challenging the narrative that has defined her. The sorceress was conquered, subdued, and erased from her own story. Her voice was never preserved. But voices leave traces. They survive in the gaps of texts, in the moments when the official narrative falters, in the questions that go unanswered. They survive in what is not said, in the silences that surround a character who is never permitted to explain herself. This reconstruction is based on those traces. It draws from Circe's actions as described in the Odyssey, from the historical context of Greek attitudes towards women's autonomy and the rhetoric of civilization versus sorcery, from the symbolic role she plays in Western literature's long tradition of dangerous women, and from the philosophical implications of a being who possesses knowledge, exercises power, and refuses to apologize for her existence. It is an act of imaginative scholarship, an archival fiction, but it is also, I believe, an act of justice. Circe represents not the terror of feminine evil, but the terror of feminine autonomy that refuses to submit. She demonstrates what occurs when a woman possesses power and knowledge, when she lives outside patriarchal structures, when she will not be conquered until she chooses alliance on her own terms. Her argument is this: that the men who arrived at her shore were not innocent travelers, but armed invaders, that her transformations were not acts of malice, but revelations of truth, showing men what they already were when appetite consumed them entirely, that she was called a sorceress not because of what she did, but because she refused to accept masculine authority as natural law. That she was erased because her existence challenged everything the Greeks believed about women, power, and the proper order of the world. The lecture is titled On the Hungers of Men. It's attributed to Circe, daughter of Helios, dweller of Aea, keeper of transformations. What follows is her voice. Playback begins now.
They arrived at my shore as they always do, hungry. Not merely for food, though that was the excuse they gave themselves. Hungry for conquest, for story, for the right to say they had been somewhere, taken something, survived something. Hungry in the way that men are hungry when they believe the world exists to feed them. I watched them beach their ship, watched them send scouts ahead, hands on their weapons, eyes scanning my island as if it were territory to be claimed rather than home to be respected. They did not ask permission. They did not offer greeting. They simply came. And when they found my house, when they heard me singing, because yes, I was singing, I who have lived alone for longer than their grandfathers' grandfathers have been dust, they assumed I would welcome them. Let me tell you what I saw. I saw men who had left their homes to follow another man's war. Men who had spent 10 years learning to kill, to take, to justify violence as heroism. Men who were now lost, far from any shore they recognized, and who had learned that survival meant seizing what you needed before someone else seized it from you. I saw their hunger. Not the simple hunger of empty bellies, though that was present too. I saw the deeper hunger, the one that makes men dangerous. The hunger that says, I want, therefore I am entitled. I need, therefore you must provide. I have suffered, therefore I may take. This is the appetite I know best, the one I have studied for centuries. You must understand. I am not mortal. I do not experience time as you do. I have watched generations of men arrive at my shore, each believing himself unique, each following the same patterns. I have learned to read them the way you might read weather. The signs are always there. The way they move through space as if it belongs to them. The way they assess what might be taken. The way they perform courtesy while calculating advantage. The way they smile while their hands rest on their weapons. I know what men want before they know it themselves. And so when these men, Odysseus's men, though I did not yet know his name, when they entered my hall and I offered them wine and food, I was not acting from malice. I was acting from knowledge. I was showing them what they already were. The transformation is always described as my cruelty, my sorcery, my unnatural power used to harm innocent men. But consider what I actually did. I gave them what they wanted. I fed their hunger. And when that hunger consumed them entirely, when there was nothing left but appetite, I simply made visible what was already true. They became swine, not because I hated them, not because I am a monster who delights in causing suffering, but because they arrived at my door as creatures of pure want, and I revealed them as such. This is what transformation means, not the creation of something new, but the revelation of what was always present beneath the surface. Men call this magic, as if it were something foreign to nature, but I call it sight. I call it the ability to perceive what others refuse to see. When Odysseus came, protected by Hermes, armed with the herb that would make him immune to my drugs, he arrived with a sword drawn. He threatened me. He demanded I release his men. He spoke of justice, of the laws of hospitality, of the crimes I had committed against innocent travelers. and I looked at him, and I saw the same hunger I had seen in his men, the same certainty that he was entitled to what he wanted, the same willingness to use violence to obtain it. But I also saw something else. I saw a man who understood strategy, who knew when to fight and when to negotiate, who recognized power when he encountered it and knew how to navigate it. So I made him an offer. This is the part of the story that troubles those who wish to make me simply a villain. Because I did not fight him, I did not maintain my position. I released his men. I welcomed him into my bed. I spent a year offering him hospitality, guidance, knowledge of the path ahead. I became, in the story that survives, his ally, his lover. Some even say his victim, seduced or coerced by the hero's power. But let me be clear about what happened. I chose. There is a difference between surrender and strategy, between capitulation and calculation, between losing power and choosing how to exercise it. When Odysseus stood in my hall with his sword drawn, I could have fought him. I am divine. I am daughter of Helios. I have power that mortal men cannot comprehend. But I have also lived long enough to understand the cost of such fights. If I had destroyed him, more would come. His men would seek revenge. His patron goddess would intervene. The story would become one of a dangerous sorceress who murdered a hero, and my island would never again know peace. But if I chose to release his men, to offer hospitality, to share what I knew, then I could shape the story differently. I could become the wise woman who aided the hero, the divine figure who recognized his worth, the ally who proved essential to his journey. Do you see the difference? In one version, I am destroyed. In the other, I am remembered. In one version, I lose everything. In the other, I determine the terms of my own survival. This is what women with power learn if they wish to keep it. We learn to choose our battles. We learn to recognize when resistance will be called monstrosity and when cooperation will be called wisdom. We learn to exercise agency within the narrow spaces that narrative allows us. And we learn to live with the knowledge that our choices will be misread, that our strategy will be called seduction, that our survival will be called surrender. But I want to return to the question of appetite, because this is what I truly wish to be understood. When I transformed those men into swine, I was not acting arbitrarily. I was responding to what I saw in them, and what I saw was hunger without limit, desire without consideration, the belief that their needs justified any action. This is the appetite that makes men dangerous, not the simple wanting of food or rest or pleasure, but the wanting that recognizes no boundary, the wanting that says, what I desire, I deserve. What I can take, I should take. What stands between me and my satisfaction must be overcome. This is the appetite that launches wars, that justifies conquest, that transforms hospitality into entitlement and need into right. And when men arrive at my shore carrying this appetite, when they enter my home expecting to be fed without offering anything in return, when they look at me and see not a person but a resource, then yes, I transform them. I show them what they are. Pause. But here is what troubles me, what has troubled me across all the centuries since that day. When Odysseus slaughters the suitors who have invaded his home, who have consumed his resources, who have harassed his wife and threatened his son, this is called justice. This is called heroism. This is called a man defending what is his. But when I transform men who arrive uninvited at my home, who expect to take what they want, who see my solitude as an invitation rather than a choice, this is called sorcery. This is called cruelty. This is called the dangerous power of a woman who lives outside male authority. Tell me, what is the difference? Tell me why his violence is heroic and mine is monstrous. tell me why his appetite for home, for wife, for revenge, for glory, is noble, while my desire for solitude, for safety, for the right to determine who enters my space, is treated as unnatural. Pause. I know the answer, of course. I have always known it. The difference is not in the action. The difference is in who performs it. Men may exercise power and call it justice. Women who exercise power are called witches. I released his men because Odysseus asked me to, because he had the protection of the gods and the leverage of force, because I understood that my choices were limited, and I chose the option that allowed me to survive with my dignity intact. But I want it known. I want it recorded, even if only in this testimony that may never be heard, that I did not release them because I believed I was wrong. I released them because I chose to, and there is a difference. The year that Odysseus spent on my island is remembered as a delay in his journey, a pleasant interlude, perhaps, but ultimately an obstacle to his homecoming. Time wasted in the bed of a sorceress when he should have been pursuing his true goal. But that year was not wasted. In that year, I taught him what he needed to know to survive the journey ahead. I told him of Scylla and Charybdis. I warned him of the sirens. I explained how to reach the underworld and return. I gave him knowledge that would save his life and the lives of his remaining men. I gave him this freely, not because I was compelled to, but because I chose to. And in return, he gave me something as well. He gave me a year of companionship, of conversation with someone who could match my intelligence, of intimacy with someone who understood strategy and survival. It was not love, though some have called it that. It was not seduction, though some have called it that too. It was an exchange between equals, a year of mutual benefit, a choice we both made. When he left, I did not beg him to stay. I did not curse him or his journey. I simply let him go, as I had always known I would. Because I understand something that the story often forgets. I am immortal. I will be here long after Odysseus has returned to Ithaca, long after he has died, long after his name has been forgotten by everyone except those who read the old poems. I will still be here on my island singing while I weave, and men will still arrive at my shore, hungry, and I will still know what to do with them.
The recording ends here. What follows is a contextual note drawn from the surviving record. That was Circe, or rather, that was what Circe might have said if Homer had permitted her to articulate a complete defense. The primary text, once again, Homer's Odyssey, composed in the 8th century BCE, contains no record of Circe delivering philosophical testimony in her own voice. The documented version describes the following. In Book 10, Odysseus and his men arrive at the island of Aia, exhausted and desperate for provisions. They send scouts ahead who discover Circe's house. She welcomes them inside, offers them food and wine laced with drugs, and transforms them into pigs. Odysseus, protected by the god Hermes and armed with a magical herb called Mali, confronts her with his sword drawn. She submits, releases his men, and becomes his lover, offering him guidance for the journey ahead. The documented account, filtered through Odysseus's retrospective narration, describes this as cunning, the triumph of Greek intelligence and craft over dangerous feminine sorcery, the proof that masculine authority, when properly exercised, will always overcome unnatural female power. In Book 12, Circe appears once more, briefly, indirectly. Odysseus returns to Aia to bury Elpenor, one of his men who died in an accident. Circe greets them, provides funeral rites, and offers final warnings about the sirens, Scylla, and Charybdis. She tells them how to survive the journey ahead. Then she disappears from the narrative entirely. After that, Circe vanishes from the text. She isn't given resolution or granted closure. She simply ceases to exist in the narrative, her purpose fulfilled. For centuries, early interpretation treated Circe primarily as narrative device, a temptress, a sorceress, an obstacle to heroic progress. She functioned as proof of the dangers posed by women who possess power and live outside male authority, representing everything Greek culture feared about feminine autonomy, knowledge without proper supervision, sexuality without proper containment, agency without proper submission. Circe became a type, the dangerous woman who must be overcome so the hero can continue his journey. She appears throughout Western literature in various forms: the witch, the seductress, the femme fatale. In every iteration, the structure remains identical. The hero encounters a woman with power, and through violence or cunning proves his superiority. The woman is always defeated. The woman is always wrong. The woman is always, in some fundamental way, a threat to civilization. The scholarly record indicates a pattern of interpretation beginning in the 1st century BCE. The Roman poet Ovid reimagined Circe in his Metamorphoses. In his version, she becomes a jealous lover who transforms her rival Scylla into a monster out of sexual possessiveness. The documented evidence suggests Ovid stripped away any complexity Circe might have possessed in Homer's text, reducing her to a figure of feminine jealousy and spite. In medieval Christian allegory, Circe was reinterpreted as a symbol of carnal temptation. She represented the pleasures of the flesh that distract men from spiritual truth. Her transformations were read as metaphors for how sin degrades human nature, reducing men to beasts. The documented texts reveal a character whose power was entirely pathologized, whose knowledge was classified as demonic, whose autonomy was proof of her distance from God. In Renaissance drama, Circe became the archetype of the seductress who delays the hero's journey. She appeared in plays, poems, and moral treatises as a warning about the dangers of feminine beauty and the necessity of masculine self-control. The documented pattern shows each retelling stripped away more of her complexity. Each interpretation reduced her to a single dimension, the dangerous woman whose power must be neutralized by masculine authority. The critical reframing accelerated in the mid to late 20th century. Feminist literary theory began documenting alternative interpretive frameworks. Critics noted that the Odyssey was not simply an adventure narrative, but a text deeply invested in patriarchal authority. The documented analysis revealed patterns. The poem consistently frames women's power as unnatural, women's knowledge as dangerous, women's autonomy as threatening. Those who refuse to submit to masculine authority are classified as sorceresses, monsters, obstacles requiring elimination or conquest. The rhetoric of civilization versus sorcery, scholars demonstrated, was not descriptive but prescriptive. It was propaganda, a narrative tool used to justify the suppression of women's agency, the pathologizing of women's knowledge, the erasure of women's perspectives. The historical record demonstrates continuity. The rhetoric of natural versus unnatural feminine behavior didn't end with the Greeks. It was deployed by Romans against women who refused marriage, by medieval Christians against women who possessed medical knowledge, by early modern witch hunters against women who lived independently, by modern institutions against women who challenge patriarchal structures. The archival record recommends attention. Circe is still on her island, immortal, alone, remembered by everyone as a sorceress, but her voice is not gone. It is there in the margins of the text, in the questions Homer does not answer, in the silence that surrounds her. It's there, waiting. And if we listen, if we are willing to hear what the sorceress has to say, we might learn something about the stories we tell, the heroes we celebrate, and the voices we choose to preserve. We might learn something about whose hungers are treated as natural and whose are treated as dangerous. We might learn something about power. Ghost Lectures, Voices from Classic Literature is written and narrated by Danielle Christmas and produced by Audio Ellis. If you enjoyed this lecture, consider subscribing and sharing the recording with another reader of classical literature. Additional lectures will be released as new materials are recovered.